Hello and welcome to this week's episode of Buddhish. This week we'll be discussing a little bit about our own tastes in music. We recently did an episode that will be going out soon if it hasn't already about Buddhism and music and the role that different kinds of music and different instrumentation plays in Buddhist ritual, but also just in the realm of music which is Buddhist influenced. So we thought it would be cool to continue the conversation about music because we both like it a lot.
To be clear, this whole episode is just a pair of nerds talking music. We're setting Buddhism aside for this week.
We thought that we would talk first a little bit about sort of what we like to listen to. I would get a chance to talk a little bit about what I like to play and what Leo Leo is up to.
For clarity, Leo Leo is the band that Nick is a member of.
And we would just go through some of the genres we like, some of the artists and songs that we're listening to the most right now, and see where the discussion goes from there. An important note before we get started, all of the song names, artist names, all that stuff that we mention, there will be links to their pages or to videos of those songs in the show notes. It'll link to YouTube, so you'll be able to see, listen to all that stuff there.
So, yeah, I guess let's start with genre discussion. That seems like a decent place to kind of get going with it, right?
Exactly, yeah. That's probably a good idea. So what sort of genres of music are you listening to the most right now? What do you like? What do you like about them?
So that's a deep question because my music collection is quite eclectic. I'm looking at it now. There's a lot of metal and a lot of rock, a fair amount of electronic music, but also I've got a band here that is a quartet of cellos. I've got some bits of world music. I've got a little bit of pop. I've got a fair amount of jazz. It's from all over the place. I've also got a lot of video game influenced music on here, not just original soundtracks, which are on here a lot, but also remixes of video game music. And it's just kind of everywhere. The only genre I don't have much in is country. And yeah, that's just a matter of I haven't found country music that I like.
You know, I'm very much the same way. I grew up in the Southeast, and I think that, you know, when you grow up in the South, or you grew up kind of in the South Midwesty area as well, I think that you either grow up just loving it and being all into it when you're from there, or you're kind of the opposite, and it's like you just can't make yourself like it. No amount of exposure, no artists you find, they never ever actually like become something that you're into. They never are pleasant for you to listen to, and I think that I'm definitely that person. My mom listened to country music all around me all the time when I was growing up. All my friends in high school and stuff were all into it. I've got friends here, even in Seattle, Washington, who are super into country music. And it's kind of confusing to me. I mean, it's like, you know, very urban living, and they're listening to, you know, songs about like beer and tractors. And I know for a fact that most of them have never seen a tractor in person in their life.
Yeah. Country music, the current state of country music could be its own topic, and something that I've heard people who actually like country music talking about before. It is known even within its own
fandom, yeah,
that it's a very tropey kind of music that gets a lot of pandering, but also, like, you know, people can like what they like. That's fine. But I do think you're right in that a lot of the folks who grew up in the South where it is more popular probably have a lot of exposure to it, and not necessarily of the good kind. I remember multiple times in school having to deal with folks who are playing just the most obnoxious stuff from the 90s country scene that I could not stand.
Yeah, and it was the 2000s for me, right? Like it's all this like stadium pop country music. It's all this stuff that's very disingenuous, right? Because the people who are making it are multimillionaires, and they are, like you say, pandering to this very blue collar, very financially underserved, very hardworking kind of subset of the population. And, you know, it's kind of gross. There is some good country music out there, and there's music in the country genre that doesn't do this, but it's just enough of a problem that it kind of has lasting repercussions through the rest of the genre, and it's enough of a problem that it just puts me off of it.
Yeah, I don't know how to find country music that I would potentially like, so it's not something I've gone very deep in. But let's not spend this episode being negative. Let's talk about stuff we actually like. So I talked about rock, metal, electrical. I do have some hip hop in here. I've jazz in here. What about you? Are there any genres you're going for?
Yeah, and it's very similar. I'm kind of all over the place, right? What I'm listening to a lot lately has been a lot of Japanese jazz and like fusion rock. I'm a big fan right now of a guy named Makoto Matsushita and of Masayoshi Takanaka. Both of them make very sort of, I guess I would call it like laid back rock that's very musical and jazzy, but still kind of pop influenced. And some of it is instrumental, like Masayoshi Takanaka is almost entirely instrumental. And all of it has really good guitar work, right? I'm a guitar player. I have been since I was 6 years old, and I'm 27 now. Like it's always going to be the guitar for me. And so I've been listening to a lot of that, a lot of city pop from the 80s, 90s, even the 70s. So that would include like Maria Takeuchi, Kingo Hamada. Right now, someone making very good city pop and jazz, Ryu Senkei, all that good stuff. In terms of English language / American music, I am definitely very into a lot of classic rock and roll and blues. My dad was a blues guitar player, and I think of myself as being sort of an originally blues influenced guitar player. So I listen to a lot of like Buddy Guy, B.B. King, Stevie Ray Vaughan, and then like Jimi Hendrix and John Mayer, and like all of these really titans in blues guitar playing. Very into all that stuff. And I guess the last genre that I'll mention that I'm listening to a lot of lately has been this kind of jazzy funk fusion. So I mentioned that like the Japanese artists I was into, they were like fusions of pop, rock, and jazz. I'm listening to a lot of jazz and funk combined as well. So one artist that I'm really into right now, or listening to a lot of for one reason or the other, is Wolfpack. They have a very good guitar player named Corey Wong, and all around there's very talented musicians. Corey Wong is also in a group called the Fearless Flyers with Mark Lettieri, another good guitar player, Joe Dart, legendary bass player, and Nate Smith, an incredible drummer. And they make mostly instrumental, I guess you could call it like prog funk, because like I feel like sometimes their goal is to be like the most technical and like musical that they can possibly be while still having a really good groove. So I like that stuff a lot. And that's very influential on what the band Leo Leo is up to right now. We're not making instrumental stuff, but we're trying to, find this nice little space in between rock, pop, jazz, and funk that we can really just make people dance and have a good time and make it something that we're proud of having made musically, while also being something that's very, widely marketable, something that's got a very wide appeal, something that makes a lot of people happy and makes a lot of people want to move and stuff. And so the result is that, sometimes our songs can sound very different from each other. You've heard us play, and I'm sure that you've heard that we kind of have a wide range of sounds as we try and sort of triangulate this space that we want to occupy.
You do.
So I think that it's sort of a matter of, we've only been together for a year and a half or so, but we really want to feel out all the places where movement, where dancing, where fun can be had, where upbeat music can be found. And so that's where we're at. And that's kind of how that's connected to these musicians like Wolfpack, Corey Wong. All these groups are very strongly influential on our songwriting right now.
It's interesting. I am not at all a dancer. Most of the time when I'm listening to music, if the activity I'm trying to focus on is listening to the music, I am in my room with the lights off and my headphones on and just in bed, letting the music be the entirety of what I perceive for the time. Let's see, looking through my playlist right now, there's a lot of, I guess you would call it stoner rock or metal on here. The two bands that I have the most albums from are King Buffalo and Elder. These are a pair of bands that are really meandering, music focused. Like they have vocals, but it's much more focused on the guitar work they're doing, and it's got this like ethereal, otherworldly sort of. They're going for an epic, melodramatic tone. It's good stuff to smoke a joint to, which is why it is called stoner metal. I've got a lot of Tool on here. I try not to be the obnoxious type of Tool fan, but I do like their music a lot. Let's see, moving outside of metal, I've got a lot of music that is video game influenced. So, music from original soundtracks. Chrono Cross has an incredible soundtrack. Bastion has an incredible soundtrack. But anything that's Supergiant Games makes is going to have a good soundtrack. I've also got remixes of video game music from a site called Overclocked Remix. They have just tons of music available for free that is people remixing or rearranging video game music. And so, like, I've got, Final Fantasy composed as a rock ballad. I've got Chrono Trigger's parts of Chrono Trigger's soundtrack as a jazz orchestra, that kind of thing. There's just a ton of music to look into from that site. There's definitely something in there that you'll like if you look for it. Moving out more outside of metal again, I've got a lot of music from Blue Man Group. I've got a lot of music from Incubus, which they stray into metal sometimes, but I would call them more of a rock band than a metal band. Let's see. Florence and the Machine. I'm not even sure what you would call her music.
Yeah, I think that's probably like alternative or like indie alternative, right? I mean, it's kind of hard to place.
Yeah, it doesn't really have a proper genre name, which is why we just say alternative, I guess. Like, is that what people usually mean when they say alternative is music that doesn't have a solid genre?
Typically, yeah. I guess, I mean, it's such a vague name, right? I mean, I think that it is sort of like a catch-all for everything that you can't squarely put into one box. But, indie is starting to also take that sort of meaning as well. Like, used to be indie strictly meant that, the artist who made it published it themselves. They weren't attached to a record label.
Independent.
Exactly right. Now, indie is starting to take on its own thing because the artists who made music like that started to have their own particular types of sounds. And so you'll have like someone who claims their genre as indie, but they're with like Interscope Records and they've got, world tours going on. Right. I mean, that's kind of, I've heard that sort of title ascribed to an artist I really like named Hosier. He's an Irish singer who makes, ungenrefiable music. And he's like internationally famous. He dropped out of college when he got signed. Like, he is the whole thing. I'm sure that many who are listening have heard his 1 billion times streamed song, Take Me to Church. He's one of the biggest artists in the world right now. And some people still describe him as indie. And I'm like, well, he's not. But I hear why you say that.
Yeah. There's a lot of music like that on my list that has a hard time really being classified. Like, so getting into some Buddhist influenced music, I have a band called My Sleeping Karma on here. And like, they mostly just music. There's not a whole lot of vocals, so they're not necessarily referencing Buddhism specifically or directly, but you can kind of hear the influence going on there beyond just the aesthetic sense. They name a lot of their tracks after Buddhist and other Eastern religions concepts. So like I'm looking at the playlist, they've got Maya Shakti, Ananda, Ahimsa as song names. So, and they're like a weird mixture of guitar, and I'm just not sure how to describe it other than listen to it. Let's see, going into some hip hop I like. Incubus is all over my playlist.
Love him.
Rest in peace, we lost a legend way too soon. And the various MCs that he worked with kind of started me actually understanding that, like, oh, hip-hop is a type of music I like. Because I came up in Arkansas suburbs in the 90s. So my initial exposure to hip-hop was what suburban white kids in Arkansas were listening to, and it was garbage.
Mm-hmm.
So for a very long time, I just thought, I don't like hip-hop, I'm going to go past it. And then I heard some of Nujabez's more jazz-influenced stuff. Like, it's still hip-hop, but it has a jazzy sound to it. So I'm like, okay, I like this. And then the song that completely converted me into, oh, hip-hop is something I really like, is Highs to Lows off of Nujabez's album Metaphorical Music.
That one is so good. That whole album is awesome.
Yes, like, it's on here, but there's not a whole lot of songs that I listen to and it's like, oh, I have changed my tastes now. And the vocalist for Highs to Lows is Size Star, and he's one of my favorite hip-hop artists. That track, Hitting Me Like It Did, comes from him at least as much from Nujabes. He's excellent. And that song completely converted me. From there, I branched out. I like a lot of music by Too Mellow, and he's also very video game influenced and has gotten some of his music into video games. So, like, that is a combination that probably makes a lot of sense given my other interests.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I'm excited to see that site that you mentioned in the show notes, because, like, I'm definitely going to go in there and check out, like, rock ballad Final Fantasy and jazz orchestra Chrono Trigger, because, like, you know, I don't listen to a lot of video game soundtracks, like, for leisure, but I still love a lot of the music that comes from them, and I think that it's, like, really an art form unto itself that's even different from, you know, making popular music that you want people to listen to on its own. So it's like, you know, it's a whole different thing to score for a video game, and it's a whole different thing to score for a movie. And so I love a lot of movie and video game scores that I've heard, and I'm definitely into seeing that.
When you're going through looking at Overclocked Remix, I recommend starting with an album they put out, Chronology, a jazz tribute to Chrono Trigger. It's one of my favorite things that they've done. For a more classical flavor, look up 7 Songs for Seventh Saga, which is a single person playing 3 cello parts to the score of the game Seventh Saga. It's a fairly obscure Super Nintendo RPG. The game itself is, in my opinion, not very good, but the music in it is excellent, and that album takes it to another level.
A lot of these other names that you mentioned too, like Nujabes, like we talked about, love him, rest in peace. And yeah, that sounds incredible. And it's cool that he was able to sort of bring you back around on hip hop, because I initially didn't like hip hop a lot as a kid either. As a kid, I was really just into, like, metal and hard rock. And then I sort of learned more about hip hop as a whole genre and learned a little bit more about the history of it, and just came to appreciate it a lot more, you know, because I didn't realize all of the sort of personal tensions that can come into hip hop.
Yeah, it's a very personal genre.
Exactly, yeah. And I just couldn't relate with what was being, you know, rapped about, sung about, talked about. And so I was like, oh, well, you know, this just missed me. It's not that it's X, Y, or Z. It just isn't for me. And then I came around to it and I realized, like, oh, there's a lot of stuff you can appreciate about this. And it's very enjoyable and cool to listen to, even if, you know, I can't directly relate to a lot of the experiences that people rap about. So it's like, you know, I came around as well, sort of later in life.
shall we talk a bit about playing music?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Totally. Yeah. So, do you play any instruments or have you in the past?
I have in the past, so I was a band nerd in high school. I started on flute, which is awkward because I am a huge dude, and flute, at least in when I was in high school, like flute players were almost entirely small young women. So, when I went to band camp, I would get made fun of every once in a while because I was the only dude in the flute section. But I gravitated to flute again because of video games. Like, the reason I wanted to play flute was Final Fantasy VI, Secret of Mana, Secret of Evermore. The Super Nintendo could produce some incredible flute sounds, and I wanted to be able to do that as well, so that's where I went into it. When it came time to get in the marching band, the director was like, please, you being in the middle of the section that is all otherwise, the tiny teenage girls that you're playing with, it looks awful on the field. Please try something else. And at that point, I switched to tenor saxophone.
Oh, cool.
Fun note, if you hold a tenor saxophone like a flute out to the side, the fingerings are actually the same. So there was actually a pretty easy transition for me there because I didn't have to learn a whole lot of new button combinations. It was more a matter of figuring out how to produce sound with a reed rather than a flute.
That's very interesting. Yeah, I've never played any wind instruments whatsoever, and the thing that's sort of intimidated me about it has always been the issue of embouchure or whatever they call it.
That's it.
So I understand that it would be like easiest probably to make sound with a what do you call it? A transverse flute, right? Or I'm sorry,
right?
Is that the right? The one that you blow straight into?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
And then a longitudinal flute would be harder because you have to blow into it sideways. And then a reed would be slightly easier. And then the hardest, as I understand it, would be like a trumpet or a tuba or one of the horn brass instruments that like requires you to buzz your lips to play them. That sounds like the hardest.
So the way I've heard it from trumpet players is that it starts hard, but once you figure out that spot, it gets a lot easier quickly. Whereas while I was playing flute, embouchure was a thing I struggled with a lot. I had a very hard time hitting high notes because translating between the medium notes and the high notes of a flute is literally just a matter of changing the way you're blowing the air across the tone hole and maybe a couple of different button presses. Like, it's mostly a matter of your embouchure, like you said, to switch between those notes, and I never really got the hang of it. So even before I was having to deal with a marching band, I was kind of going away from flute because flute pieces tend to be really, really shrill.
Mm-hmm.
And it was getting to a point where I didn't even like the music I was playing because it was so shrill, but that's what all the parts were for. So I was already kind of moving away from the instrument anyway, and then marching band, it was better to be elsewhere for the marching part.
Totally, yeah.
But then high school, like, I went to a magnet school for a boarding school, actually, for the last 2 years of my high school. And I simply did not have the time and energy to continue to be academically viable and also in the band. So at that point, I fell off and have kind of stopped playing music since.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that happens to a lot of people, I think. They pick one way or the other and they don't really keep up with their instrument. You know, a lot of my bandmates and friends and stuff, they used to play something in school as well. And, you know, like you say, once you get to a point where it's like time to start thinking about college, it's hard to like have the time and energy to really put into the instrument at the level that you're at that point in your life.
Yeah.
And also do school, you know, like unless you're really seeking like a music scholarship or something like that, then, you know, it makes sense to focus on other things.
Yeah. At that point, when you're getting proficient, in order to continue, you're expected to get even better. And even those starting points, that requires a lot of time and practice. When I was in the beginning parts of it, I would play at least a little bit of something almost every day. I would skip certain weekends, but in junior high and the beginning of high school, yeah, I was practicing my instrument every day and just didn't have the time for it. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, a lot of work for sure.
So how about on your side? You play guitar. Let's hear about that.
Yeah, so I started playing guitar when I was 6. My dad played a lot of guitar even whenever I was in the womb. And so there's, a little bit of this idea that like it was something I grew up so closely to that I kind of wouldn't have had the choice not to play it. Not in terms of like anyone forced me, but it was just around all the time. And so it just seemed like the thing to do. It was something that I really connected with early on and something that I started to understand simultaneously. At the same time, I started to understand things like language and social interactions and relationships and stuff. And so I think it's a testament to the value of picking up an instrument whenever you're really, really, really young and sticking with it. Like it has very positive repercussions. But anyways, started playing when I was about 6, when I was big enough to hold one. And I ended up taking lessons in middle and high school. So for about 6 years, with the end of year 6 being like right around the time I graduated high school. So grade 6 to 12, I was in lessons and I was learning, the science of it all, the music theory, reading music, chord theory. And that was whenever I feel like, I really got a lot better and came into my own in terms of proficiency because, there are a lot of wonderful self-taught guitarists out there, but guitar is hard and music is hard. And, if you don't have some sort of accountability and some sort of structure for learning it, then, it can be easy to spin your wheels for a really long time and not get better and not feel better in it and not get as good at expressing yourself on the instrument. So the lessons really helped a lot. And I'm very glad that I had them because they made a huge difference. I never got to play guitar or any other instrument in the context of like a school band because I went to schools that were too small or too academically focused to have music programs. So all of my music lessons, all of my music involvement was always outside of school. It was always in lessons that my parents had paid for. So I missed the band nerd experience, but I knew a lot of people who had them. So I took those lessons for that amount of time. And in high school, around the time I was 14-ish, I joined up with other students at the music school that I was taking lessons from, kind of like a School of Rock situation. And we were all put together as, like high school age kids, and we formed a cover band called Calculated Error. If you really dig deep in YouTube, you can potentially find video of me back in like 2011 or 12 playing, like Bon Jovi or Adele, or we played Aerosmith, we played Stevie Wonder. You can find me playing, just top 40 hits covers with this group when I was like 15, 14. And we just played at like bars and clubs and, little festivals and events around the small town where I grew up. And that was great. Like as soon as I tried that out for the very first time, I suddenly like fell in love with being in a band and playing in front of people. Like that was my favorite thing in the world, was like live music at the time. And it continues to be my favorite thing in the world. Like there is no greater serotonin dump or dopamine dump for me than to be creating live music in front of people and sharing, the sound, the vibe, the feeling with my bandmates and with the audience. That sort of connection, that sort of relationship, that's just, it's just pure heroin for me. Like I want to have it all the time. I want to play live all the time. And I want to play with people all the time. And so that was a really positive thing for me. I put a lot of work and a lot of time and a lot of, energy and resources into making that band good, making myself good in that band as a guitar player, and, really tightening up. And I think that was just as formative and important for my knowledge of music as lessons and music theory and stuff was. I think that learning music theory and sheet music and going the classical sort of route is very productive for like knowing how to play what's put in front of you. But I think that playing in front of people does offer something that's sort of ineffable and something that's, abstract that all that stuff doesn't offer you. Playing in front of people and playing with other people is, I think, crucial to being a well-rounded musician. So that's something that was very important to me and continues to be. And then college and grad school, I thought that I was going to sort of drop guitar into the back burner, into the backseat of my life and focus on career, focus on, school, focus on whatever else. And so for 4 years in between graduating, actually for 8 years, in between graduating high school and graduating with my second master's, I didn't really do much other than just play by myself. But I always had wanted to be in a band. I always had wanted to be doing something music. It's just that I never was in a place to. I was in college towns that didn't really have a developed music scene. And by this point, I had been playing for like 15, almost 20 years. And most of the other people I knew who played guitar were very stereotypical. They were like basement guys who like still didn't know how to tune the instrument, or, they just wanted to play music that I wasn't super into or that just wasn't good, and they weren't good at playing it. And so I kind of stayed out of that. And then when I moved to Seattle, one of the things that I had on my plate was the opportunity to really pursue music in a place where there are going to be incredibly talented, skilled musicians and an audience for good original music. And that's something that I had never had before. It's an opportunity that had never presented itself. And so I moved here in September of that year. I think it was 2023. And by November, I was already in a band.
Nice.
Actually, I was actually in two. I was in an acoustic duet that I left fairly early on to focus on Leo Leo, but I jumped right in because I was desperate for that part of it. I actually had two bands before I had a job. So I just, was sure about wanting that part of my life and part of my experience to come out. And so, yeah, we've been playing together now for about 18 months, and I love all of my band members dearly, dearly, dearly. They are some of my best friends in the entire world, and I can't say enough good things about them. They're all incredible musicians. We have two singers that are actual, like, classically trained opera singers who are singing in like a pop/funk/disco band, which is incredible. They literally both have master's degrees in music. We have a bass player who has also been classically trained in piano and guitar and bass going back, 20, 30 years. We have a drummer who's been playing for most of his life, and he's almost 40. Our third singer also plays the keyboard and sings and somehow manages to do both of those at once. It's all incredible stuff. So, I mean, we really have a special thing going, and it's everything I wanted and more.
Glad to hear it. And I've seen you guys at one concert, and you sounded great. Listeners, if you're still with us, do check out Leo Leo. They're great. And yeah, it's interesting. When I was playing in junior high and high school, the audience never factored into my mind at any point.
Really?
Yeah, like I did not care whether there was an audience there or not. It was all about syncing up with the other people playing. That part, I got it wasn't as strong as what you're describing, but I did get that similar, oh, this is cool feeling from being in sync with, a whole orchestra in the room. But for me, it didn't matter if we were in rehearsal or playing the actual concert. The audience was at no point on my mind. It was just the music for me.
Yeah, well, it's kind of circumstantial, right? I mean, whenever you're playing the kind of music that you would play in that sort of setting, it's not nearly as much about, the call and response and the connection between the musicians and the audience. It's more like a classical, genuine performance where they're all there to watch you do the thing.
That's true.
And, in the case of Leo Leo and other sort of live music performances, it's much more a matter of a conversation or a negotiation between musicians and audience to try and, raise the vibe up as much as possible, and so I think there's a lot of value to both, right? Because the connection that you're talking about finding with playing with others that were also playing with you, like that's just as much a part of it as like the back and forth between, musician and audience. And I can see how that gives you a lot of joy.
So that's been us rambling about music for about 40 minutes. If you enjoyed that, please let us know. And thank you for listening with us. Next week, we will be back to Buddhism.
And remember, you can find all of the artists that we named in the show notes, linked to their YouTube or to the sites that we talked about, where you can find all of the interesting music that we like.
All right. Well,
thanks for listening. See you next time. If you like our show and you want to financially support it, we ask that you instead send that generosity to support a worthy cause. For now, we ask that you support victims of the floods that struck Central Texas in early July. As of this recording, there are nearly 120 people confirmed dead, with over 170 people still missing. We've included a link to GoFundMe pages in our show notes. If you can, please join us in helping these people recover from this tragedy. Thank you. My name is Nick Bright, scholar of East Asian religions and the voice of Hearer.
And I'm Docs, editor, question asker, and voice of Hermit.
And this has been Bright on Buddhism. Thank you for listening. If you like our podcast, or if you have any questions that you'd like us to discuss, we'd love to hear from you. Please consider leaving a comment, review, or subscribing. You can also reach us by email at bright.on.buddhism@gmail.com. As always, citations and resources for this episode can be found in the show notes. Thank you.